The stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisper in Darkness. I'm your host, the Man from Lang. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, we are continuing with our review of the player cards in the Edge of the Earth Investigator expansion. This time around, we're taking a look at the Rogue/Mystic multi-class cards. There are 4 of them: Ethereal Slip Level 0, Ethereal Slip Level 2, Blur Level 1, and Blur Level 4. There are spoilers throughout if you care about that sort of thing. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Just a quick reminder of how we rate cards here on The Whisper in Darkness. The best of the best get an Elder Sign, while the worst of the worst get an Auto Fail, and the cards in between get a +1, 0, or Elder Thing respectively. Cards that you build around or are good in one particular investigator get a Blessed token, while cards that we believe are destined to end up on the optional list of taboos or that are just bad for the game get a Curse token. Before we get started, I'd like to thank the patrons of this channel for their tremendous support. The Arkham Horror LCG community is amazing, and these people have gone above and beyond to bring you content like these player card reviews. Speaking of amazing members of the community, special thanks to Didi Carrera, the latest patron to Embrace the Darkness. Thank you very much, Didi, for your support. It makes me really happy to know that you find value in the content that we create here at The Whisper in Darkness. Support from patrons like Didi lets us do one of my favorite things here on the channel, and that is giveaways. And I'll be announcing a new giveaway soon. Stay tuned for that. If you'd like to be amazing like Didi and support the channel's goals and see your name on this list, head over to patreon.com, sign up for a tier of your choice, and claim your rewards. That would be awesome. Special thanks to Coleman Rochitty for the amazing art that graces the channel, Nicole Fiscus for the new Whisper in Darkness logo that graces the podcast, and Nate Lost in Time and Space for the intro as well as the overlays. Thank you very much. I couldn't do it without you. Without further ado, let's get started. We are back with our reviews of the player cards in the Edge of the Earth Investigator expansion. We are making our way through the multi-class cards, which brings us to the Rogue and Mystic cards. Not many of them to talk about, just 2 cards, both have upgrades. We're going to start off with Ethereal Slip. It's a 2-cost event with a willpower and agility skill icon, spell and trick traits. Choose a non-elite enemy at a revealed location up to 2 connections away. Swap places with this enemy. When I saw this card, I can think of one situation when I would have liked to have this ability, and that is during the Doom of Etzli, when you're making your way back out of the temple. The ability to swap places with that enemy, with an enemy in front of you, would be nice. Honestly, I can't think of many other situations when I would want this effect. What do you guys think?
Yeah, the issue with this card is that, well, there's a few issues. 1, it requires a non-elite enemy on the board. And 2, it requires that that enemy is up to 2 locations away from you. And 3, it also requires that you want to be at that enemy's location. And then, even at best, you're trading 2 resources in a card for 2 movement actions.
Oh, right. So
and that location has to be revealed.
Yeah.
Which I think is, for me, that's the killer on this card. If it was just a location, okay.
Yeah.
But the fact that, at least in solo play, it's like, how many times is there going to be an enemy at a revealed location that I actually want to go back to? If it was any location, okay. You know, something spawns in front of me, fine. But yeah, this card has so much working against it. I
think the one case I could see for this is that it lets you bail out a friend who's not at your location. Let's say, the seeker, for example, draws an enemy. You, as the rogue, can basically bail them out by swapping places with that enemy. It's like the one case I can see for this, but it's so specific. If you want it for the movement, I think just play Scout Ahead instead. You spend 1 and you get 3 movements, which is more than this. And then I think in a general sense, I think I would rather play. I mean, yeah, it's a little more action intensive to go catch up with the Seeker in that illustration I gave, but I'd rather play like Cheap Shot, something that just works regardless of the situation, rather than having to have this sit there in your hand and wait to do something. The effect kind of reminds me of Bait and Switch. The survivor card that you probably don't even remember what it does because you've never played it.
Or Think on Your Feet.
Oh yeah, or Think on Your Feet. Yeah, that's also another very specific very specific card that doesn't do enough.
And it's
Yeah.
like even in that scenario that you mentioned, right? The Seeker is like a couple of locations away from you, and you need to move and like deal with the enemy. Just play Spectral Racer. You get an engage and 3 damage on the enemy, and then
That's
it's
true.
dealt with
That's true.
permanently.
Yeah, that's true.
I was thinking about other situations, and there was one I came up with, and that's if you're playing the Essex County Express, and say you're playing in multiplayer, some of the group has forged ahead, they've revealed a couple train cars, you're a little bit behind, the agenda's about to advance, there's potential for you to be sucked out of the train, the group ahead of you has been engaged by one of those grappling horrors, you swap places with that grappling horror, suddenly you're back up with the rest of the group, the enemy has been dealt with, hooray, everybody wins. But is that one situation enough to prevent me from giving this a tentacle?
Yeah, and then on top of that,
I don't think so.
and on top of that, the card does nothing. If you're not in that specific situation, there's no or, there's no other function. It does nothing.
Doesn't even have two matching skill icons. Like what the? What a stinker.
Yeah, it's basically until you have that non-elite enemy on the board, it's a willpower and agility skill icon. Unless you want to swap with that enemy. I mean, the swapping is kind of unique. We don't have a lot of cards that do this sort of effect. Bait and switch is a good call out because I think that one you switch locations with the enemy next to you. Is that how it works? See, nobody knows because nobody plays bait and switch.
I gotta look it up right now. Here it is. Okay. Survivor, trick, 1 cost, evade. If you succeed, if the enemy is non-elite, evade the enemy and move it to a connecting location.
Okay, so
it's like you shove something away. Oh, okay. Doesn't even do what I thought it did.
That's like arguably better because then the enemy is exhausted.
Yeah, it's true. Oh, it's bait and switch level 3 that lets you evade something that's next door.
I mean, you could also maybe use this, say, dynamite blast as a thing. If there's an enemy at your location and you play this and then somehow swap places with another enemy, so now there are 2 enemies at that location and then you dynamite blast them. I was also thinking in like the Devourer below, if somehow you did an amazing job in Midnight Masks and there are very few cultists on the main path, it's like you could play this and like, ta-da, it's like that cultist is no longer at the main path and you were at the main path and now you have a clear shot at the ritual site. But again, that assumes there are no other enemies at the main path, which I don't think I've ever done well enough in Midnight Masks to guarantee that scenario. So, I can come up with things to use this card on, but I'm not impressed. I'm giving it a tentacle.
If it let you disengage, not exhaust, not auto evade, but if it let you disengage from everything at your location and then swap places with something 2 locations away, then I can see a use for it. But it doesn't. So I'm also going to give it a tentacle.
Yeah, I just don't like cards like this. It's a tentacle for me too.
However, if you believe this card is amazing, well,
you are in the minority.
There is a level 2 version. It has it costs 1. It has willpower and 2 agility skill icons, spell and trick trait again. Choose a non-elite enemy at any revealed location and swap places with that enemy. This removes the whole up to 2 connecting locations away thing. Keeps the still has to be a revealed location. So I was thinking, of course, of scenarios like Echoes of the Past where enemies spawn all over the map. But of course, this doesn't help you because none of those locations are revealed. That's not great. Maybe this works with the explore mechanic in the Forgotten Age because locations in that campaign tend to show up revealed anyway, so maybe there's something there. I wasn't impressed by the level 0 version, and I can't see myself paying 2 XP for this.
It's like the issues with the level 0 card, the enemy being non-elite and the location being revealed, still stick with this card. So it's like Sure, you may get an extra movement or two, but for 2 experience, it's not worth it.
I'm starting to think back to elusive.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's kind of like an elusive, except you can go to an enemy's location, where elusive you
Mhm.
can't go to a location with an enemy. That's sort of like,
yeah.
well, here you go. It's like an elusive, but
It's backwards elusive.
it's backwards
Yeah.
elusive. Yeah.
Backwards elusive. You know what I did realize is that this is 2 XP, and the effect is pretty much strictly better than bait and switch level 3. It kind of tells you how bad bait and switch is that they're power creeping it, and we're still gonna give it a tentacle, right, guys?
Oh yeah, without question. This card still is bad.
Yeah. When I think back to all the games of Arkham Horror I've played, I don't think I've ever thought to myself, or very rarely, you know what would be cool right now? Swapping places with an enemy.
Yeah, I
That
think
has
these
never
2
really
cards-
occurred to me outside of the Doom of Etzli, where it's just like, you know what would be cool right now to be able to swap places with that enemy.
Yeah, I think these are 2 cards which Arkham Horror seems to have quite a few of these, and I've probably mentioned this a few times during our card reviews, not just for this set, but for the revised core, is that there's like an alternate universe version of Arkham Horror where like enemies are hard to kill, and cards like this actually have some use, where you're trying to stay away from enemies, but that's not the Arkham Horror we have.
Yeah, and the fact that this is non-elite is, again, non-elites are very common, but
Mhm.
I mean, even when I think of the Doom of Etzli, potentially one of the enemies you want to swap places with is the Harbinger, and this doesn't help you with that. So, tentacles across the board for Ethereal Slip. Unfortunately, not an effect that I have been looking for in this game, but who knows? Maybe it will find a place at some point down the line. That brings us to Blur, level 1, 2-cost asset that has an agility skill icon spell trait, uses 3 charges as an action if Blur has charges remaining. Evade. For this evasion attempt, you may use your willpower instead of your agility, and you get +1 skill value. If you succeed, spend 1 charge, and you may take an additional action this turn. If you succeed by 0, take 1 damage, and it takes up an arcane slot. This is the final piece of the new Fight, Investigate, Evade triad. This one reminds me a lot of Quick Thinking from way back in Undimensioned and Unseen. It's like you're getting 3 charges worth of Quick Thinking. You're getting the +1 skill value. You're getting the additional action. But the nice thing is you don't have to succeed by 2.
The question you have to ask yourself when you think about including this card in your deck is how often is that extra action going to be spent on something other than moving? Because if you're going to spend it on moving, just play Mists of Relie. Because Mists also has a much easier effect to deal with than discarding a card versus taking damage as a Mystic or a Rogue.
True.
So if you're just using it to evade with a
Mhm.
+1, it's okay. Getting the movement, which I think is probably 90% of the time what you're going to be doing. Maybe you use that second action to evade a second enemy or something like that. But apart from that, it just feels like Miss to me, and that's kind of lackluster, especially for something I have to pay experience for.
Yeah, I actually was thinking of it from the rogue side. It actually reminds me of a little-known card from Return to the Path of Carcosa called Suggestion Level 1, where that one is you evade and you add your willpower to your athletics to evade. But that one doesn't give you any extra actions or anything like that. Compared to just straight up evading, you get +1. So you're spending 2 resources and an action to get an asset into play that is going to give you +1, and then so what you're really doing here is you're saying I'm going to be evading things, and I'm going to spend 2, and I'm going to give myself 3 actions. So you're playing this asset that's going to give you 3 actions. So it's like an Eon chart, but worse.
Oh, it's way worse than Eon chart.
Yeah, but we're not going to.
Worse.
Yeah, no, everything is. Okay, so if you think of it like that, where it's like, okay, I'm getting myself 3 bonus actions, and I don't have to succeed by 1,000,000. It's okay because it doesn't actually help you evade by very much, unless of course you're using your willpower. Like if you're Leo Anderson. Oh, that's a funny image. Leo Anderson going hubba hubba hubba. and then blurring himself out. It's fine. I mean, given that you're gonna evade, being able to like buy yourself 3 actions for the cost of 2, like that's not too bad. Like even in a solo situation, I guess like you're playing a solo rogue, it can kind of bail you out from those really killer situations in true solo where you get engaged by multiple things. Yeah, so this like kind of gives you that 4th action when you're getting surrounded.
I think you can use it multiple times.
Oh yeah, even oh, you don't have to exhaust it.
Yeah, so you can
Ugh.
blur one enemy, get an extra action, blur another enemy, get an extra action, blur another enemy, and then move.
True. Yeah, that's true. So even like Finn kind of likes this because like given that you're using Finn's ability to evade, it's kind of like he gets a 4th action.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this isn't bad. I think this isn't bad.
You mentioned the comparison to Mists, Nate, and I think that is a good one because I think you will, if you are traditionally doing the whole I evade and move thing, that's probably what you're going to be using this for. But I kind of like this more than Mists simply because with Mists, you are confined to moving. With this, you are not. So say I'm at a location, I draw an enemy during the Mythos phase, but there's a clue I need to grab. So this gives me the option to evade, investigate with that free action, and then move away with my final action. Or at least gives me another bite at the apple if I'm sketchy on whether I can actually investigate this location or not. Or, gives me the move, or lets me play an asset or something like that. Say the enemy is, for some reason, I need to kill this enemy. And I need a weapon. This lets you evade, play the weapon, go from there, sort of thing. So, while I think you will probably use this to move a lot of the time, the fact that it doesn't necessarily force you to move, I think is pretty nice. Which is why I compared it to quick thinking in the beginning. I think if this wasn't confined to evading, man, this card would be just crazy, crazy good. But the fact that you have to evade something to get the extra action, that's, depending on the scenario and the play state and stuff like that, that isn't necessarily going to happen all that often. So you're not guaranteed to get the 3 actions out of this. But if you're playing, I don't know, maybe there is a build in multiplayer where you're just dodge tanking everything, throw some extra charges on this thing with, there's Winds of Power in this set. And if you can somehow draw Winds of Power during your turn, you can get that for free and then get the 2 charges on this. I mean, Safina, of course, gets those events. She can double up on those charge addition things. So if you're playing like an evasion Safina deck that adds charges to this, taking a ton of extra actions after you're evading enemies doesn't seem all that bad to me. But
Well, she is on the artwork.
she is. She is.
Oh, the artwork's
Not Leo Anderson. For some reason they decided players would prefer to look at Safina than Leo.
Yeah, and we obviously have to mention Akachi, right? Because Akachi gets an extra charge. So it essentially turns that, charge into an extra action, which is cool.
How would we rate this one?
I think initially I was kind of stuck in the mindset of looking at this as a 1 XP version of Miss, but I think I've kind of come around to it a little bit. I'm going to give it a +1. I think it's solid. Like you were saying, yeah, most of the time you are going to be moving, but the fact that this gives you the flexibility to choose whether or not you want to move is nice.
Also, if you fail the evade test, you don't lose a charge.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm going to give this a +1 as well. The extra flexibility, I look at it as more like a rogue card, to be honest, because it's a rogue card that takes the sting out of having to pay that action tax to evade, especially if you're playing solo and you have to evade something multiple times or you get jumped by multiple things. This will bail you out. So yeah, I'm going to give this a +1.
And in Finn can kind of use it as a weird way to make Leo DeLuca, because he gets the extra action to evade, and then this thing allows him to take whatever action he wants afterward. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, and I can also see this combining well with like Lucky Cigarette Case, because you get that +1, and then that increases your ability to succeed by 2, and then you draw a card out of it, and then you get to do something else. So it kind of leads to that action chaining rogue, like Skids or Finn or. Yeah, I like this. I'll give this a +1.
I'm going to give it a +1 as well. When I initially read this card, I was pretty high on it. I mean, the fact that Mystics don't have a lot of ways to get additional actions, and you mentioned you like this from the Rogue perspective. I like it from the Mystic perspective because Mystics just don't have access to additional actions, and the fact that, say, I get this down, I haven't drawn either my fight or investigate asset, I get jumped, I evade it, bang, I play my Rite of Seeking or Sixth Sense or whatever asset I needed, and I'm not losing any tempo out of that. I really like that ability. I like the flexibility compared to Mists. You are paying some XP for this, of course, so we have the whole down the rabbit hole issue again, unless you're playing Mateo or into the thick of it. But I do quite like this card, and I think it's additional actions are always good, and the fact that you don't have to succeed by 2 or really do anything, and you're never going to waste a charge on this.
Yeah.
You're always going to get the 3 actions as long as you've got the time to evade enemies is pretty nice as well. So +1s across the board for Blur, which brings us to Blur level 4. 2 cost asset, willpower and agility skill icons. Spell trait uses 4 charges. If Blur has charges remaining evade for this evasion attempt, you may use willpower instead of agility, and you get +2 skill value. If you succeed, spend 1 or 2 charges, and you may take that many additional actions this turn. If you succeed by 0, take 2 damage. Thoughts on the upgrade?
I think it's interesting. Okay, this is all I'm going to say about it. Okay, I think it's really interesting that you only get 2 bursts of 2 actions. Then you look at Eon Chart, level 4. Okay, that's enough.
I mean, the fact that Eon Chart, you can use an action from Eon Chart to use Blur to get an additional action. Whoo, man.
Get 2 additional actions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you could have 7 action turns on a regular basis with Blur and Eon Chart. That's just stupid. Anyway, back to Blur level 4. I don't know. I personally feel like if I'm playing an effect like this, I feel like the level 1 version's probably enough.
Yeah, I agree. Compare this to Missive Relay level 4. Missive Relay level 4, I've got it open right here. It gives you 5 charges. And you get +3 to your evasion attempt. And if after you succeed, you get to move to a connecting location. 5 charges is quite a bit compared to this one's 4 charges. Yeah, I think Blur level 1 kind of does everything you need it to do.
And taking 2 damage is a lot.
That starts hurting. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Like, I could see myself using Blur level 1, succeeding by 0 3 times, taking 3 damage, and being okay. I can't see myself using Blur level 4, succeeding by 0 4 times, and taking 8 damage. That, I don't see myself being okay. Yeah, I think Blur level 1 gets the job done. Yeah, I guess you can have... I mean, it can be useful for that burst turn, where you just, make all the things happen because you've got the additional 2 charges. Yeah, 4 XP is a lot, though. I think Rogue might have some other ways of achieving that.
I think this, for that burst turn you're talking about, is pretty sweet, especially if you're at the end of a scenario and you need to cover a lot of ground quickly. You evade something, you move. You evade something again, you move. And you can just keep, if you need to finish it off with a double move somewhere and a resign, this gives you that option.
Yeah,
pretty nicely, which Mists does not do. Mists gives you the move, but not that resign, which, as we've all experienced, moving into that resign location and then being like, well, I guess I'm waiting a turn. I have no actions remaining, so I'm going to suffer through another encounter phase and hope I don't die in the meantime.
I could see a speedrunning Safina coming out of this. Or some sort of speedrunning rogue deck where you use this to evade something, get 2 charges, get 2 actions, and then use that to play, use one of them to play, Scout Ahead. So it's like, and then you still have another action. Yeah, I could see some, like, if you go for the big 7 action turns, like if you're Skids or Finn or Safina, I could see something like that happening.
Hmm.
But for the most part, like, and especially if you're playing multiplayer where you can't really afford to leave your team behind like that, I could see Blur level 1 basically doing everything you need.
So how do we rate this one?
I'm gonna give this one a 0. You know, like Matt said, the level 1 version is probably just gonna do you exactly what you need it to do.
Yeah, I agree. 0, because yeah, there's no real need for the upgrade. 4 XP is quite a bit. 4 XP is quite a bit for what it does. I think Blur level 1 that gets the job done. You don't really need to upgrade it.
Yeah, I was tempted to give this one a +1, but the more I think about it, the more I just getting one additional action a turn is fine. Getting 2, I mean that's very situational when you would need to get 2 actions. Yeah.
And you only get to do it twice. Like, whereas if it had 6 charges, then it's like, oh, now I get to do it 3 times.
Yeah, I guess what you're paying for that 4 XP is the option to take 2 actions. Yeah. That's what you're paying for. The skill value is nice. The downside is pretty punishing, I think, especially in investigators who might be interested in this, where 2 damage starts to hurt quite a bit. But I suspect that if you are like, what's Safina? She's got 4 willpower, 4 agility, so she's evading at a 6. Chances of you succeeding by 0, I think, if you're evading at a 6, are fairly low, since most enemies have lower evade values than they do fight. So I don't think you're going to take 2 damage that often, but I can't remember offhand how much health Safina has, but you wouldn't want to screw that up all that often.
Also at 4 XP, you get to consider Suggestion level 4, which I think is a very underrated card. So Suggestion level 4, like Safina, even with no stat boost, she's evading at 8 with Suggestion level 4. And if you succeed by 2 with Suggestion level 4, you don't spend a charge at all. So you get to keep doing it. It becomes your evasion engine over and over. Yeah, it doesn't give you extra actions, but it also lets you like dodge 3 attacks. So
plus you have Eon chart and Safina, so
well, we're not going to talk about that.
I think in the end I'll give this one a 0, because this one does seem kind of like a luxury upgrade.
Yeah.
The level 1 version does everything you need, and while those 2 additional actions seem pretty sweet, just taking 3 or 4 actions is probably good enough for most players, and taking a damage if you happen to fail isn't going to be that bad. So yeah, I think 0 is good for this one. I could see some players upgrading to it if you've got the extra XP. I don't find as a solo player I have that option as often as I would like, but hey, we've got in the thick of it now, so solo players
in the thick of it, plus down the rabbit hole to get your little savings.
That's right. We have no excuses anymore. Solo players are just rolling in XP.
Especially Mystics. XP. In the thick of it, 2 arcane research and down the rabbit hole. Now all of a sudden you're getting like an extra 3 experience per scenario.
Oh, and if you're playing Safina, I think I figured out. I cracked the code, guys. You play Safina because she's on the card, so you use in the thick of it to grab 1 copy of Blur, but also Sharon's Obel. On top of down the rabbit hole, and then you get yourself like 1,000,000 XP. You're the Scrooge McDuck of XP at that point.
I don't know if I'd play arcane research and in the thick of it though.
Or mental trauma.
That's 4 trauma. 2 trauma I'm willing. 2 trauma is fine. 4, even I start to balk at 4 trauma.
Ooh.
That's going to do it for our look at the Rogue and Mystic multi-class cards in the Edge of the Earth Investigator expansion. Let us know in the comments down below whether you agree or disagree. Any final thoughts on Ethereal Slip and Blur? Sort of 2 cards at the opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, I feel like, Rogue and Mystic are like the 2 classes that really epitomize that kind of design in player cards. It's like they're either really good or they're really not good. And feels like there's very little in between.
You're kind of right. Okay, but we got Blur level 1, and that's pretty good. So there's a little that's nice.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Blur is decent.
Yeah.
Ethereal Slip. Play the other ethereal card.
That's going to do it for this episode. If you enjoyed what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you need to contact me, I can be reached at manfromlang@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at manfromlang. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your elder sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.